Leaps toward liberty, and the images here, and what's going on. We're going to take a little walk from 1676 to 1776. For this century, for this 100 years, what's going on? What takes a group of people who come to this new world, English just citizens. I mean, these are Englishmen. These are people who are devoted and committed to their nation. These are, for the most part, wealthy investors that are coming here trying to see if they can become as wealthy as Spain here in the early 1600s. And so we've developed colonies. We've begun to colonize as a nation in England. And they're here and they're looking for wealth and power. What takes them in 100 years from that to a group of people bent on rebellion and bent on fighting for their independence at risk of life and fortune? It's just an amazing dynamic that takes them through that process. Okay, so we're going from this point here of the very first act of rebellion to the point here where Jefferson will write that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by a creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, he plagiarizes. Jefferson's a great plagiarist. He does that a lot. So anyways, gets that from Locke. So that's going to take us there. So let's talk about the first of these events. That didn't work. Still didn't work. Stop. There we go. 1676. 1676. Those of you who may not be familiar, this is known as Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion. The players that you see here, this is Nathaniel Bacon here in the center of the painting. This is his uncle, Lord Berkeley. Yeah, Lord Berkeley. He is the governor of the colony of Virginia. This is Jamestown here in the background. This is the governor's mansion there. These groups of people here, these are the wealthy plantation owners who've been in the colonies now for a couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades. And then this is the small farmers. These are the groups who were promised access, promised land, promised power for paying their passage over into the New World. So here we see this image. What do you get from Patrick's body language there?
He's angry.
He is not happy with his uncle, right? See, these two, this is uncle and nephew. Lord Berkeley is his uncle. And we all have, right? We all have that family member, that one person in your family. Come on, think about it. We all have that one person in your family. You think, oh, it's Thanksgiving, and all the family's going. Oh, is Uncle so-and-so coming over? You're like, okay, great. That's just that one, right? Everybody's got that one family, right? And so this is Nathaniel. And Nathaniel is that family member that's just a little crazy. He's just a little bit out there. Now, his family is a family of wealth and influence. In England, they're of power and influence. They're friends with the king. They have to be friends with the king in order for Lord Berkeley here to be the governor of Virginia, the most powerful of the colonies. They're friends with the king. But Nathaniel is just that weird, kind of out there kind of family member. And so Nathaniel decides, they convince Nathaniel, what you need to do is pay your way over to the New World. Okay, and you'll get land when you get over there. Do you remember learning that in AP? You get land when you go over, right? Got like a couple hundred acres. So he paid his way over, and he was expecting to be joining up with these guys. Okay? Well, when he got there, he found out that there is like 3 sets of land. Like if this is Virginia, and it goes from the ocean to the mountains. Okay? And from the ocean to, I don't know, maybe roughly about here, about a third of the way into the colony, you had the land near the coast. You had the really rich, fertile farmland. This is where they're growing the tobacco that the king is getting, and they're taking this tobacco back over there, and it's become a staple crop, and the king is paying them quite well for the tobacco. And these plantation owner guys, they're making a fortune as well as Lord Berkeley here. Then you have this middle section of the colony, which is where the small 200-acre farms are being handed out to these newcomers, okay? And the ground is a little rocky. It's not as nice. And then back here on the far section, you have the Native Americans who've been driven out of their land and into the mountainous area. All right. Well, when Nathaniel gets here, when Nathaniel Bacon gets to the new land, the world, and he's given this 200 acres in the middle, he's not too happy about it. He says, all right, maybe this will work. Then he realizes, and he starts to notice, if you remember from your U.S. history class, that his uncle has set up some procedures and policies and things in the colony where there's a lack of equity. This group is treated much better than this group. Okay? First of all, when it comes to harvesting their tobacco, they're giving preferential timing on the harvest. So where whatever the demand is in England for the crop, that demand is first met by this group. And they're getting top dollar for their crop as it's being sold to the king. Then this group gets to put their tobacco on the market, and the prices begin to drop, and so they're not getting as much, not to mention the fact that it's very difficult to farm out there because you're constantly having to beat back the Indians. Here come the Indians, here come the Indians, and your farm is constantly under attack. So it's difficult to farm, and it's difficult to make any money. And Nathaniel says that's not fair. Okay, there's an inequity, there's inequality. So this is Nathaniel Bacon's complaint. There's inequality. I don't like inequality. I don't like not being treated fairly. I don't like the fact that we're all British citizens. We paid our way over here just like they paid their way over here, and we're not getting fair treatment. We're not getting the king and the governor of Virginia to treat us equally. So Bacon gets angry, and he gets a lot of his neighbors angry. And they take up weapons. And he's mad at the king. He's mad at those plantation owners. He's mad at his uncle here, the governor of Virginia. So he gets a bunch of his friends. They grab their weapons. They immediately turn right around and go and attack the Indians. Why are they attacking the Indians? Why are they attacking the Indians? Somebody tell me why they're attacking the Indians. I thought he was mad at his uncle. Yes?
Weren't the Indians like raiding the settlements?
Precisely. Okay? And so, like McKinney High School's offensive line, see, here's what happens, like a football analogy. Here it is. And so there come the Indians, right? And you're supposed to be the buffer here. You're supposed to be the guard. Here come the Indians. And Patrick Henry and all of his buddies see the Indians coming. They go, they're back there. Just right over there. Yeah, just go get them. And then there go the Indians. They go and attack the plantations and destroy their crops and destroy their farms. And Patrick's feeling pretty good about himself. Yes, now we've done it. Now we've got their attention. So then they take up arms, they follow the Indians, march into Jamestown, set fire to the city, right? They're torching the entire city. The city is on fire. He is fed up with his uncle, and he walks over to his uncle, and he's ready to tell his uncle exactly what he could kill his uncle. He's so mad. Does this guy look like he's ready to fight? No. He doesn't. What's he doing?
That is the question.
Does that look like a posture of aggression or submission? It does appear that way. So let me just paraphrase. Nathaniel's uncle here. His uncle comes out, and there's Nathaniel. And he's got all his buddies with him. The town is burning. And he comes down here, and he comes up the steps of his mansion there. And he walks over to him, and he throws up in his coat. And I'm just going to paraphrase here. And he looks at him, and he says, "Would you please just kill me now? If I have to live one more day knowing I'm related to you and that you have anything to do with my family, I would rather be dead. You're a waste of space, a waste of humanity. I can't believe that there is enough air in existence to keep you alive. You are an embarrassment to humanity. Kill me now." Okay. Nathaniel's like, it's kind of harsh. It's not your family. Just need a minute. It's going to be okay. With me? And off he goes, right? He turns around and he actually walks through the crowd. He's like, my uncle. How would he treat me that bad? He's real upset and he just walks off and leaves, right? But what's notable about this, even though even though Nathaniel doesn't finish the job, what does he do here? It's the first colonial rebellion. It's the first instance in where somebody stood up and said there's inequality. It's not right. We're going to make some noise about this. We're going to stand up and we're going to fight back. We don't have to put up with this. The very first one, here in 1676. Right here. Nathaniel doesn't live long after this. He lives about a month after this event. A little bit longer than that, maybe, but he dies from complications of a couple of major issues. Probably had some other things going on, too, but a couple of big ones is he had a really advanced case of body lice, literally eating away at his flesh. Yeah, you can see here, the artist is kind of giving you a little bit of a rendering here about, see, look at these guys. Look how tanned they look in the dark lines. And all these guys look like nearly dead, like with the grays and stuff on their face right there. It's a hard existence out there in the mountains or near the mountains. And so he has this body lice, all bugs all over him, constantly. Okay? All of them. And then complicate that with the fact that he has an advanced stages of dysentery. Remember dysentery? You know how you get dysentery?
Yeah, it's like bacteria you get from you ingest in the water
Yeah.
and it causes like
Intestinal
Yeah.
bleeding, and so basically they didn't know in 1676 that they should actually build their restrooms and latrines downstream. They built them upstream, then drank the water. Bad thinking, really. So here's this guy covered with bugs, and he is just this bug-riddled, poopy, bloody mess. Just gross. Okay? So he dies from the complications of all that. He is so gross. Here we go, ready, it gets worse. He is so gross that his buddies don't even bury him. They don't want to touch him. They take torches and they just throw them at him. It's like, yes, that one got him. All right, good, there you go. And he goes up in smoke right there. He's like just burning. They basically cremate him from a distance and throw torches at his body and cremate him. So that's the thing. Oh, but this is, of course, the very first documented case in the colonies of crispy bacon. So there's that. Thank you very much. Going to be here for another 30 minutes. Now, then we go on to the next thing here. 1741. 1741. Anybody know what this is?
it's the Great Awakening.
Great Awakening is right. Great Awakening. So here we have George Whitefield, and who's the other guy? Jonathan
Never mind.
Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards. Nicely done. And right, there's Whitefield and Edwards, and these two guys are basically British. They come over to the colonies in the late 1730s, and they spend about 3-5 years going up and down the East Coast, speaking in every colony about this notion or concept of a spiritual awakening, right? But it's not so much the spiritual awakening, the spiritual side of it, that sort of works as an exigent towards Patrick Henry, but there's something else to this. And what these guys are doing is they're standing up in the rocks, they're speaking to hundreds of people, sometimes more than 1,000 people, gathered around them, okay? And without the benefit of microphones or anything, as far as public address, they're screaming at these guys. Remember sinners in the hands of an angry God, right? Screaming at them. Hey, you're going to hell. You don't stand it. You better repent. You've got to get your life right. Just screaming. And the reaction, the emotional reaction. I think this painting does a pretty poor job of depicting what you read about some of the emotional reaction. These people are fainting, falling out on the ground, weeping and crying. And the emotional reaction to this was intense. It was intense. He's just telling them, you've got to get your life right. You've got to repent. You're going to hell. You better get right or you're going to get left and all this other stuff, right? Just yelling at them, really giving them up for them. And they're just shaken by this. Ben Franklin attends one of these meetings and is moved by it. But what moves Franklin is the notion of this colonial experience, a commonly shared colonial experience. And there's your exigent. It's a commonly shared colonial experience. Now, did England have colonies around other parts of the world? Yeah, not just in America. So they had colonies in other parts of the world. No other colony experienced this, only the Americas. Okay? And so it was a commonly held colonial experience. All of them were sort of hearing the same thing, drawing the same conclusions, sort of experiencing the spiritual awakening, and all of them coming through and hearing the same message. Franklin loved that idea. That's where he's going to get his Albany Plan of Union, is this notion of all the colonies working together, which the king was a big fan of. But that they realize that they've got this common occurrence, this common event. So they decide that the thing to do here is to build on this. And here's what I envision in my mind as having happened. Okay? So imagine this is taking place in Pennsylvania somewhere. It's probably somewhere near Philadelphia. And so it's taking place in Pennsylvania, and this small farmer is walking by on his way home, and he just sees this going on and looks at all this. And he comes home to his wife just to explain to his wife what happened. So here's what I think that would look like. So he walks in the door and just like, honey, you would not believe what I just saw. It was the most amazing thing. There's about 800 people standing around down there on Cooper's Corner down there, and there's this massive rock, and there's a guy standing there, and he's screaming and yelling at people about the fact that they're going to hell. Now, listen, we know enough about the Puritan Church to know that there are some people who are going to hell and some people going to heaven. So that's part of the elect, and that's no big deal. But he says, the guy on the rock, He says that we can go to God, that I can go to God and talk to God about what's going on in my life. I can repent and go to God with that. I've never heard that before. This is amazing. Like, my salvation is in my hands? Honey, you too. You can go to God. Now, me and you, we can go to God and just work. In fact, we got to take all 15 of our kids, all 15 of them, and we're going to go and we're going to talk to this guy and figure out what's going on here. Because he says we can go and talk to God and we can work this out with just me and here. Wait, just me and God? Hold it. Hold it. Wait a minute. If I can work out my personal salvation with God, and God cares what I think, then why doesn't the governor? Shouldn't my voice matter to the governor? Shouldn't my voice matter to the king? If my voice matters to God, then shouldn't my voice matter to the king? And this is that common revelation, this common epiphany, that their voice matters, that what they believe and think matters. They've already spent decades of salutary neglect, being ignored by the king, and they've already developed governments and established representation and written constitutions. And so they hear this message, and they think, wow, it's more than just the words on a page. It's more than just the common experience. It's an individual experience. It's an individual voice, okay? Jefferson will announce it in 1776 as governments that are required to be built upon the consent of the governed. He says any government should be built on the consent of the governed. And if it's not, then you can overthrow that government and replace it with one that is. And so this consent of the governed, the fact that their voices matter, they've never thought about that before. But if they could go to God, why can't they go to the governor? Why can't they go to the king? Why wouldn't you write the letter, a king to the letter and say, hey, not real happy with what's going on over here? And so this just takes them to that different place, right? So now their voice matters. So it's one thing to rebel, another thing to say, look, I'm rebelling with cause. Now, fast forward to 1773, that's a familiar image. What's happening there?
Boston Tea Party.
That is, in fact, the Boston Tea Party. And who are the people on the dock over here?
Isn't like the Suns?
Well, these people, right? These are just the citizens of Boston, and they're watching what's going on, and they're not happy. Who are the people in the Indian costumes?
I think like the organization like the Sam.
Yes, Sam Adams and the Sons
Of
of Liberty. Nicely
No,
done.
not
So
Sons
here's
of Anarchy.
not Sons of Anarchy. That's a different thing altogether. So
Jeez.
here we have Sam Adams and the Sons of Liberty, and they're all dressed up like Indians. It must have been homecoming week there in 1773, and it's Indians versus settler colonists, I guess. But anyway, so they're all dressed up like Indians, and that's sort of Sam Adams' take on the whole thing. Now Sam is a revolutionary. Sam is a smuggler. Sam is a businessman. What is Sam smuggling into the colonies here? Oh, he's smuggling everything. He's smuggling tea, he's smuggling cloth, he's smuggling sugar, he's smuggling anything the king is bringing over. They're going to smuggle it, bring it in, so that they can avoid paying the king's tax, right? That's what the colonies were all about. And what was the message Sam was telling them? No taxation without representation, right? He said, none of that. We can't allow that. The king is being tyrannical. The king is putting unfair taxes on us. The king is doing all kinds of things after this, but we'll talk about that in a second. And Sam says, no, enough's enough. Now, what you've heard, let me see if I can recall how this might have been taught to you, especially in elementary school. You've probably been taught that what happens here is Sam Adams and his buddies were so upset with the king because the king had placed a tax on the tea that made the tea too expensive. And this tax on the tea made the tea too expensive, and because of how expensive it was, they loved their tea, so they get angry with the king and they throw the tea into the harbor. How many of you were taught that in elementary school? That's expensive tea. Yeah, not the way it goes. No, not the story. So sorry. So here's what happens. Here's what happens. I'm going to throw it out there, and you guys will explain in a minute. They're actually throwing this tea overboard because it's too cheap. Now let that sink in for a second. So why? Why? Well, the king's taxing everything. He's taxing sugar, he's taking the Stamp Act, Sugar Act, Tea Act, all these different things, right? They're taxing everything. But they're not getting anywhere because smugglers are bringing in the goods and they're getting it. The king sees everybody walking around with the king's stuff, but nobody's paying the king's taxes, and the king's not happy. He knows there's smuggling going on, he's not happy. So what the king did, get some advice. And somebody goes to the king and says, hey, listen, here's what you do. You've got to convince these colonists to pay your tax. So do away with the tax on everything you've taxed except for tea. Really, he says? Yeah, watch this. you're going to tax the tea, and the cost of the tea, because you're a monopoly in tea, nobody else does tea, just you. You're the tea monopoly person. So because you have a monopoly in tea, we're going to drive the price of the tea down so low that when we add the tax to it, the cost of the taxed tea will actually be less than the cost of the smuggled tea. Now, why were people buying the smuggled goods? Here's what Sam Adams knew. The reason they were buying the smuggled goods is because you people are Walmart shoppers. You've always been Walmart shoppers. Even in the 1700s, you were Walmart shoppers. And you like a bargain. So you see the smuggled tea and you go, hey, that's cheap tea. Look at this. Shh, quiet. Cheap tea's over here. Don't pay the tax. Buy the cheap tea. Win, win. Yes, we're going to buy the cheap tea. Okay? What does Sam know about this plan? If this plan goes through and that tea makes it over here, then he knows you people being Walmart shoppers are going to go, the tax tea is cheaper. Oh, man, the king loves us again. This is great. I'm going to go pay the tax and buy the cheap tea. Yeah, way to go, king. Now, Sam's not happy about that. He knows that you people are not living on principle. Why are you not living on principle? I don't know. Sam doesn't know, but he's going to dress up like an Indian and show you why. Okay? And he says, come on, guys, we got to go dump the tea because these people will buy the cheap tea and pay the king's tax, and then where is our revolution? Then where is our anger? Then where are we? Can we petition? Is our voice going to matter? No, none of that, because you people are not standing on principle. You're going to just buy the cheap tea because you're Walmart shoppers. So he and his buddies go, and they take the tea and dump it into the harbor. Say, ha, now you have to buy the smuggled tea. Like that was like bad? Like, no, you should be buying the smuggled. But that's what he did. He forced them over to the smuggled tea. Well, this makes the king very angry, right? What's the king's response to that? Yes, the intolerable acts, right? He closes the Boston harbor. He sends in the British Navy to blockade the ports along the eastern coast. The army occupies Boston. The army occupies New York. There's troops all up and down the coast. There's navies that are blockading every port. They're using the ability to go in and search and seize property. Search and seize property without a warrant, okay? They're using the king's authority to place military soldiers living in people's houses. Okay, and so these terrible abuses to liberty, because the king gets so mad about what happens here. Does that help Patrick Henry's cause? Does that help Sam Adams' cause? Yes, because now, see, some of them are like, hey, come on, Sam, you dumped the tea. It wasn't even your tea to dump. How do you do that? You don't just do that. You trust us. We're going to operate on principle. And Sam says, no, you're not. So then the king gets mad, and there's people mad at Sam Adams and the Sons of Liberty for forcing the king's hand. Others are like, yeah, well, now we're seeing the king's true colors, and all this is going on. And there's soldiers everywhere, right? And there's soldiers looking for Sam Adams. Boy, they want to find Sam Adams, right? They want to find him. He is like terrorist number one. He is the number one terrorist on the terrorist watch list, and they want to find him. These British do. And that's why they're searching the countryside. That's why they're out there looking for him. And they know tensions are getting thick. Things are about to happen. Things are turning ugly. Well, fast forward then, a couple of years, and we're in Virginia, and things are getting bad, right? And fast forward here to Patrick Henry in 1775. And here in Virginia, like most of the colonies, you had three audiences, three groups. Okay, here's your three audiences. You had those people who were committed to revolution, committed to independence, believed what Patrick Henry was saying, friends with Sam Adams, willing to dress up like an Indian and go dump the tea. That was audience number one. Audience number two is you had those people who are these guys right here. Okay? These guys right here who are telling Patrick, no, do you know what you're asking here? We're British subjects. We're British subjects. We're subjects of the king. You're a subject of the king. You just don't treat kings like this. You just don't do this. You just don't declare independence from the king. We're British. And if the king wants to do this, that's what the king can do. Well, you just let these things alone. These people have a lot to lose. They have large plantations. These are the ones that Nathaniel Bacon rebelled against 100 years earlier. And then you got those people in the middle. Like, okay, Patrick, I understand that we've got to do something. I understand that things are bad. I understand that things are bad. But do we really want to go to war with the most powerful nation on the planet right now? Is this really what you want to do? Okay? And so they're torn. So that's the group he's talking to. And these guys have just finished giving a speech. They just finished speaking to this Congress here on independence, and they've just finished speaking, and they said, what we have to do is we have to send another letter to the king, another petition to the king, saying, please, 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 let's find a peaceful solution to this. Let's find a peaceful solution. And Patrick steps up and says this. Mr. President, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism, as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentleman who just addressed this House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore, I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to these gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite theirs, that I shall speak forth my sentiments freely, without reserve. You see, this is no time for ceremony. The question before this House is one of awful moment for this country. For my own part, I consider it nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. And in proportion to the magnitude of the subject, I ought to be the freedom of debate. It's only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility to which we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense? I should consider myself guilty of treason, an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. You see, Mr. President, it's natural for a man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We're apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of the siren until she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in an arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, having ears, hear not those things which so concern our temporal salvation? For my own part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I'm willing to know the whole truth, the worst of it, and to provide for it. You see, I have no way of gauging the future but by the past, and judging by the past, I wish to know what has there been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify the hopes to which these gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves and this House. Is it that insidious smile of the king's? Trust it not, sir. It will prove to snare your feet. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition compares with the warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our lands. Are fleets and armies necessary to work love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called to win back our love? Let's not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this military array if its purpose is not to force us into submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for the accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They can be meant for no other. They are meant for us. They're sent over here to bind and to rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have so long been forging. And what have we to oppose them? Should we try argument? Sir, we've been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer on the subject? Nothing. We've held the subject up in every light which is capable, but it's all been in vain. Should we resort to entreat and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not already been exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. We have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and we have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the Ministry of Parliament. But our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insults, our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge in the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope if we wish to be free. if we mean to preserve those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle which we have been so long engaged, and we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until that glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. Appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. But they tell us we are too weak. We are unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week? Or next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength through irresolution and inaction? Should we acquire the means of resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies have us bound hand and foot? Oh, the battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, we have no election if we were base enough to desire it. It's too late to retreat from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are already forged, and their clanking can be heard on the plains of Boston. Why stand we here idle? The war is inevitable, and I say let it come. Let it come. But it's in vain to extenuate the matter further. Gentlemen cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun, and the next gale that sweeps in from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so sweet or peace so dear as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take. But as for me, give me liberty or give me death. He let him have it. He wasn't holding anything back. Patrick said, I'm about to throw down with you people. I'm tired of it. No more. Have you learned nothing in the last 100 years? He said, why does Nathaniel Bacon do what he does? He does it because some things are worth fighting for. What did we learn from the Great Awakening? We learned that our voices matter and the king should be listening to us. We can't keep sending letters that don't get any results. Our voices matter and we're worth listening to. And what does the Boston Tea Party mean if nothing more than to let us know that principles matter, that sometimes standing on principle is more important than life? And he says, if I have no principles, if I have nothing with which I stand and base my life on, then why am I drawing breath? My life is vitally important, but not more important than my liberty. Golly. It gets him thinking. Wow. This guy, he's kind of laid it down. He's thrown it down and said, are you going to pick this thing up? Are you going to follow this idea? Or are you just going to keep letting the king decide for you what liberties you have? Intense. Intense. And prophetic. The next gale that sweeps in from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. He says our brethren are already in the field. Their chains can be heard, or the chains can be heard, and the clanking of the chains can be heard in the fields of Boston. This is March 1775. You know what happens in April 1775? Outside of Boston, a little place called Lexington and Concord.
The street.
Shot heard around the world, right? Next month. Why stand we here idle? Why stand we here idle? Great mind. Why are we just standing around? Let's do something. Let's make a difference. Let's go win. Okay? This is like motivational speeches of all motivational speeches, and Patrick's just getting them fired up. Okay, and so here it is, Lexington and Concord. You know what happens there, right? This is where the British are coming. The British are coming to arms, to arms. Had the British and the Minutemen ever confronted each other prior to April 1775? Yeah, dozens of times. Dozens of times. And it always just ended up with insults. Oh, yeah? Well, your uniform's ugly. Oh, yeah? Well, you live in a colony. Oh, yeah? So just insults back and forth. Okay? So they're just insulting each other until that day. And somebody, we don't know, British, colony, I don't know. But somebody fires a shot. And the war is on. blood is shed. It's Englishmen versus Englishmen. But these colonialists are convinced that they've got something worth fighting for, especially those who are loyal to Patrick Henry and loyal to Sam Adams and loyal to this cause. Some of the others are still confused by it. It's not until a year and a half later that Thomas Jefferson decides to put it on paper, this Declaration of Independence. And the colonies realize it's not going to just end with Boston. It's not going to just end with New York. It's going to be a colonial-wide event, and so it's time to rise up and declare our independence. So he makes his case. He makes his argument. Questions on that? Anything? I don't think I got time to get into Lexington and Concord too much, so I'll just leave it with that.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes. They can work.
Oh, wait! We do have time for Lexington and Concord.
We have about 10 minutes.
Oh, we have time for Lexington and Concord.
This is the best part. This is
Okay, so here comes Lexington and Concord. So the British, are looking for Sam, right? And they're looking for Sam Adams. They're looking for weapons of mass destruction. They think Sam has weapons of mass destruction.
You're
because
fine,
he's a
just
terrorist.
listen.
And
Just
all
listen.
terrorists have weapons of mass destruction. It's just a requirement for terrorists. They have weapons of mass destruction. And so they're going to go find them. Of course, we know the thing that happened here, blood is shed, and they just shot these people at Lexington, and they say, all right, guys, go back to Boston, bring back reinforcements. We've actually killed people this time. It's getting serious. We're going to go ahead and go on into Concord. Maybe Sam's still there. Maybe the word hasn't reached him, so we're going to go and see if we can find him. So they march into Concord, right? Now, when they get to Concord, there's a bridge, about as wide as where these desks are, enough to get a cart over the bridge. And they get to this bridge, and it crosses over into Concord, and you got to get over the lake, or the river, actually. The river, because it's spring, and the river's kind of swollen because of the melting of the snow and stuff. So they get over there, they decide to cross the bridge. Now, they're on this really long line. The British, that's how they march, in these really long lines, right? And they do that. But they get to this bridge, and they've got to kind of narrow it down, and they funnel themselves over. Well, there's people over there with guns. This is not a smart military tactic. You don't put yourself into a funnel because there's people over there with guns trained on you. So it's blam, 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 blam. People are dying, people are dying, people are dying. They're not getting across the bridge. So they make this military decision. All right, come on, guys, turn around. We're going back home. We got reinforcements coming this way, so we're just going to march back home. So off they go, right? Big long lines, bright red uniforms, big white X across the chest that says shoot me here, right? Okay, so off they go. You've seen the uniforms, the white X. Okay. So off they go, and they're marching. They're going, gosh, this is a rough day. I can't believe this day. Yeah. Now, what had the colonists learned from the French Indian War about the best way to fight in the New World? You what? Yes, you hide behind rocks and trees. You always hide behind rocks and trees. Indians had it right. So these colonists are hiding behind rocks and trees, and here comes the British. They're marching along. All of a sudden, they jump out behind from rocks and trees. And front row's dead, right? You hear, company, halt, yield, ready, aim, fire. Right? And what did they hit? Rocks and trees, right? Rocks and trees, because the colonists had already run about 50 yards down the road, hid behind more rocks and trees. Then you hear, company, march. I'll march again. Get another 50 yards down the road, jumping out from behind rocks and trees. Front row down. Company, halt. Kneel. Ready. Aim. Fire. Right? Okay, what do they hit? Rocks and trees, because they'd already run another 50 yards down the road. And this keeps repeating itself and march, right? And how would you like to be the guy who's like on the fourth row, right? He's back here, 4 rows back, going, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Why are we doing, and he's walking along, there is a perfectly good tree right there, and we're marching down the road. And he just knows his time's coming. Boy, that's some discipline, right? He just bright red uniform, big white X, and he knows I'm going to be on the front row pretty soon. They keep marching. Okay, and this happens like half a dozen times. Finally, the reinforcements catch up with them, and they go back to Boston. And from there, then we've got all kinds of things related to Bunker Hill and the colonies rebelling. Who do we put in charge of the colonial army militarily? Yes, none other than Jorge Washington, who will take over and do great things. So, all right. Hey, listen, so good to be with you guys today. First Amendment coming up soon. That's going to be fun to do. Political advertising is always fun. So